Season 2, Episode 2, Justified. We see the car parked outside of the factory. Dave looks at the fence and thinks he could make it over it. But when he approaches the fence, one of the cowboys comes up behind him and points a shotgun to his head, and the guy says, "Not a smart idea. Are you looking to get a bullet in your head, sir? Because you might have just earned one." Dave puts his gun down to prove to this man that he doesn't want any trouble. When Dave drops the gun on the ground, the guy says, "See? Didn't have to be hard." And once the man starts to lower his gun, Dave says, "I didn't know what this place was at first, but I think I'm getting a good idea." The guy says, "I thought you might have tried to kill me or something." And Dave looks at the factory in front of him and looks back at the guy and says, "I just wanted some knowledge about this place, good sir." Then David headbutts this man and knocks him down on the ground, then picks up his pistol up off the ground and says, "You're my way in. You see? It didn't have to be hard." Dave laughs and knocks the guy out. Back at the suburban estates. Sydney wakes up and looks out the window. She sees the sunrise and she goes downstairs to wake up her sister, Emma, and she knocks on her door and says, "Come on, sis, wake up." And Emma says, "I'll be out in a few minutes." And Sydney says, "All right, I'll wait outside." And then Sydney walks out of the house. Sydney and Emma tell Mark that they are going out on a run, and Mark says, "Lincoln and Tom are going to be back soon, hopefully." Sydney says, "We don't have all the time in the world. Kids are going to start going hungry soon." That's not happening. Mark decides to let them out, and Sydney says they'll be back by the end of the day. Back at the factory. Lincoln is locked up in a room without Tom. His hands are tied and he's in a room with two other prisoners. And Lincoln looks at these two guys that are sitting there and says, "I'm Lincoln." And one of the guys says, "How did you get here?" And Lincoln says, "Me and my friends were just trying to find supplies, and these people stopped us from doing just that. And, well, here we are." And Lincoln says, "I gotta get out of here. I gotta find my friend and figure out what's at stake." One of the guys introduces himself and says, "Well, hi, my name's Blake." And that's Joel. Lincoln says, "Look, getting to know you people is not exactly a priority of mine, so let's start talking about how we can get out of here." And Blake says, No, I get it. But these people have a lot of guns and a lot of fighters from what I can tell." Lincoln says, "The first step is getting us out of here. And then we find my friend, and once I accomplish that, we all escape this place together, with everyone still breathing." Blake looks at Lincoln and says, "Well, you got yourself a deal." "16 miles away from the factory." Dave has this man tied up in a barn, and the man looks at the barn door and it opens up, and Dave walks in and throws a picture on the ground. It's a picture of the man's family, and Dave says, "I found this in your jacket pocket." And the man would say, "Don't touch my shit." Dave looks at him and says, "Well, if you won't spill your guts, then I guess I'll have no choice, won't I?" Dave says, "We'll start with your name." The man answers, "Keith." "You mind telling me what's yours?" Dave says, "Dave." Keith smiles when he hears this, and Dave says, "Well, Keith, I got some things I need to ask you about here. First off, that place you're at, is that your home, or is that where you guys all just do the stupid shit that you do?" Keith says, "I'm not able to reveal that information at the moment." Dave says, "All right, I don't have time for this session of Let's Chit Chat." Then Dave would punch him twice, and then Keith would say, "My goddamn nose! You son of a bitch!" Dave says, "My people are in danger. Tell me where they are." Dave would punch him again. Outside the suburban estates. Sydney and Emma are outside the walls and in the woods, and they are walking through this field and they see blood on the ground. Sydney says, as she looks at Emma, "Something very terrible happened here." Emma says, "We should know." And Sydney says, "I don't want to screw this up, but this could be connected to why Lincoln and Tom aren't back yet." Emma asks, "You think?" Sydney says, "Well, I'm just saying it's strange that Lincoln and Tom haven't come back yet, and Frank and Steve for even longer." Emma says, "We should warn Wesley." Sydney says, "Wesley? We're not doing anything for that weasel." Then they walk off and try to see if they can find anything else that might tell them what this is. Back at the factory. Lincoln, Blake, and Joel are in the cell, and Blake says, "Someone's coming." Lincoln looks slightly scared, but he keeps his cool as the two men open the cell door, and one of the guys says, "That one," and take Joel away. Blake tries to stop it, but one of the guards takes his rifle and knocks Blake on the floor. And Lincoln asks, "What are you gonna do with Joel?" And the guy says, "Shut up!" Then he shuts the cell door and locks it, and now it's only Lincoln and Blake in the cell. 16 miles away from the factory. Dave continues to punch Keith and says, "No more bullshit. Why did your leader kill my folks, rape the women, kill innocent kids that had nothing to do with this?" Keith says, "Look, I don't know who you think I am, but you're mistaking me for someone else." Dave would look at him directly in the eyes and says, "I don't think I am." And then he'd punch him again, and then Dave starts to walk out of the barn, and Keith says, "I really don't think your wife and daughter would be proud of you right now." Dave would be completely thrown off by this and look back at him and say, "How do you know about them?" Keith would just smile at him and says, "Your old friend Chris." And Dave would run back into the barn and start punching him over and over again, and he would be yelling, "What do you know about them, you prick?" We zoom out on the barn door as we hear Dave punching Keith. Back at the factory. Blake wakes up and Lincoln says, "You alright, man? He knocked you out when you were trying to stop them from taking Joel." Blake quickly gets up and says, "Wait, what? Where's he now?" Lincoln in a panicked voice says, I don't know, okay? Look, calm down, we'll find him, alright?" Blake says, "Alright, how?" Lincoln says, "We'll have to wait till the next time they come, but when they do, I'll take care of it." Blake asks, "What is that supposed to mean?" We see a positive look on Lincoln's face as we see him pull out a pocket knife out of his boot. Blake looks surprised and asks, "How did you do that?" Lincoln says, "Well, a few months ago I found someone that did horrible things and killed good people, but he got away. That's when I decided that you can never be too careful." Blake would say, "Well, smart thinking." But before Lincoln gets a chance to tell Blake his plan, they hear two men coming. Lincoln quickly puts his knife in his back pocket. Then after a few more seconds, the two men with guns tell them, "You both are getting out." Lincoln says, "What?" Blake asks, "What did you do to them?" Lincoln looks at Blake with a small smile because he didn't say just Joel, he said them, meaning Tom as well. Then one of the guys says, "Gary has some words he needs to say." And then the two men point their guns right at Lincoln's face. And one of the guys looks at Blake and says, "Start walking or I will blow Lincoln's brains out." Blake starts walking out of the cell and down the hall. Lincoln and Blake are being forced to walk down this hall, and then one of the guards tells them to go left and go out the exit. Then they walk towards the exit doors. The men are telling Lincoln to open up the door, but Lincoln won't do it. Blake can tell Lincoln is about to do something, and one of the men walk up behind Lincoln. Lincoln lets the man get close to him. The guard says, "Go out the door, now." Then Lincoln headbutts the guy and tackles him to the ground. Blake tries to think fast and tries to punch the other guy, but the other man thinks fast and punches Blake and starts beating him up. Meanwhile, Lincoln is fighting the other guy and quickly takes out his pocket knife and sticks the knife into the other guy's eye socket, and the guy screams out in pain. Then Lincoln takes the guy's machine gun off of him and points it right directly to his head, and with no hesitation pulls the trigger. And then he turns around and points the machine gun to the man that is punching Blake, and he would say, "Get the hell away from him." The man would have no choice but to let Blake go, and then Lincoln would continue to point the gun to the guy's head and ask, "How many people are here?" The man would start laughing and say, "Here? Couple dozen. But you're a dead man for sure. You're all dead." And then Lincoln would shoot him in the head and then look back at Blake and say, "A couple dozen it is then." He finds a pistol in one of the guy's holsters and gives it to Blake. Blake would look around to see the dead man on the ground, and then Lincoln would start looking through their pockets, and then he would reveal to Blake that he found the keys. Lincoln says, "We gotta find Tom and Joel and get the hell out of here." Blake agrees, and then him and Lincoln run down the hall with guns and start looking for them. Outside of the suburban estates. It's getting dark now. Sydney and Emma keep looking for any more signs of where Lincoln or Tom could have possibly been, but then they come across a truck. Sydney looks into the front of the truck. She sees the driver has turned into a deadhead, and she slowly opens up the door and kills the dead truck driver with her knife. She then tries to start up the truck a few times over, but after a couple tries, Emma says, "It's probably out of gas." Sydney looks back and says, "Yeah, I think I got that." She looks a bit annoyed, but she says, "Let's keep moving and find a place to stay for the night." Emma agrees and says, "Well, if we're gonna do that, we should check if there's any food in the back of this thing." Sydney says, "Smart idea, actually." But when they open up the back of the truck, there are dozens of dead bodies stored in the back of the truck, and they are all headless. Sydney and Emma would look disturbed, and they'd be disgusted by the smell. Back at the factory, Lincoln and Blake would currently be walking down the hallway, but then Lincoln hears something. Blake puts his gun up, and Lincoln says, "I think we're just a little paranoid. Let's keep moving." An explosion goes off, and Lincoln and Blake get back up off the ground and run down the hall so fast. They see behind them 5 men with machine guns running after them down this long hallway, and Lincoln and Blake quickly go down the rest of the stairs and run down the stairs as fast as they can. They run to the bottom floor and then go into the first room to their left. They can hear 5 men running down the stairs after them. Lincoln and Blake have to think fast and go into the room and close the door before the men see them. Once they close the door, they hear the sound of chains and growling. Lincoln and Blake turn around to see a few dozen deadheads hanging on chains, and Lincoln and Blake look a bit scared, and Lincoln says, "Oh my God." Sydney and Emma are walking, and it's raining now, and Sydney says, "We're gonna have to turn back," and Emma says, "We need to get back home," and Sydney says, "We need to find somewhere closer." Emma looks like she agrees. They come across the barn, and they decide to go in. Sydney tries to open the door, but it won't open, and then they decide to go around the barn and try to open the back door. They are approaching the back door, and then suddenly they see a man being thrown off the roof of this barn, and he's being brutally hung in front of them. It's Keith. He's the man being hung. Then suddenly, as Sydney and Emma look at this happen, the barn door opens. A bunch of men with guns tell Sydney and Emma to put their hands up, so they do. Sydney and Emma look scared, and then, as the men are pointing the guns at them, they hear footsteps, and then when Sydney looks at her right, she sees a man. We see it's Dave come out of the tall grass, and he says, "Well, I've always been an honest man, so I gotta be honest. You are pretty much fucked, my dear."
Don't you cross me, look in my eye. Wanna meet God? I'll take you to the other side. I'm a bad